Welcome to the America's Food and Beverage Show virtual version. My name is Ivan Barrios, and I'm president and CEO of the World Trade Center Miami, the organizer of the America's Food and Beverage Show. Our session right now is how COVID-19 has changed the way consumers purchase products. For those of you attending the session, please type your questions onto the chat box and we will address them at the end of the presentations. So now, I would like to introduce Mark Baum, COO and Senior Vice President of Industry Relations for the Food Marketing Institute. The Food Marketing Institute is a trade association for food marketing, food retailers, and wholesalers, and they have over 40,000 members around retail stores that are members. So they're probably one of the most important trade associations in terms of food and groceries and beverages. So Mark, the show is yours, and thank you for doing this for us.
Terrific. Thank you, Ivan, so much for that warm introduction. Good day to all of you, or good evening if you're somewhat ahead of us in terms of the clock. It is my pleasure to be with you. And we're going to talk about how COVID-19 has changed the way consumers purchase products. And I think this is one that both everybody can relate to, for not just from a professional standpoint, as we have been considered an essential industry in the context of the COVID-19 pandemic, but we're all consumers. And we all do grocery shopping, and grocery shopping is one of the last vestiges of, if I can dare use the word, normalcy that we enjoy in our lives today. So I think you'll all be able to relate to what I'm going to talk about here today. One thing I will say, one caveat, one big asterisk I'll put on this entire set of remarks this morning, and that is, we've been tracking consumer behavior since the outset of the pandemic, and the last consumer tracker we did was done in late October. Much has changed since then, right? This is a very fluid situation. We saw 1 million cases tested positive in the last 10 days. We hit another record of 135,000 COVID cases diagnosed yesterday. And that will have a direct and dramatic impact on consumer behavior. So we need to be cognizant of all that. And I'll talk about the waves and things that have happened, and maybe we can together do a little bit of forecasting about what might happen going forward. So as Ivan mentioned, we are the Food Industry Association, and we have both retailer and wholesaler members. And importantly, over the last 18 months, we've changed our bylaws, and we now have product supplier CPG members as well, with all the rights and responsibilities that wholesalers and retailers have as well. I like to say our members come in 31 delicious flavors, from the one store operator in the Pacific Northwest to the Walmarts and Amazons and everyone in between. So as you might imagine, we represent the vast majority of all commodity volume sold through food stores in the United States. And I say through food stores or food retailers, not just grocers per se, because there have been shifts in the landscape. And while traditional grocers still maintain a large share, big box retailers, specialty retailers, category killers, pure play online shoppers, they're all in the game now. When somebody asked me today, who's in the food retailing business, I asked rhetorically in reply, who's not? Because obviously, even pre-COVID, we were still getting more trips than probably any other channel. And obviously, while non-food channels have curtailed their in-store shopper traffic dramatically, we have seen actually increases in in-store traffic in food retailing over the course of the last 8 months or so. We have a wide portfolio of services, which I won't go into this morning, which is out of scope for what we're going to talk about. But I would encourage all of you to go up to fmi.org and check out the website and check out the organization, kick the tires up there. And you'll be interested to know we have a coronavirus resources page, which has a plethora of resources and links and a number of ad hoc partnerships and other methodologies, frameworks, and advice that we've been dispensing the last 8 months or so. But let's get into grocery shopper trends. And this is kind of interesting because we publish an annual report every year we call U.S. Grocery Trends. And it's really a seminal piece of research. It's original research. And ironically, we release it in conjunction with just after our midwinter conference, which we hold in January. So it was published in February of this year. And then, of course, COVID was upon us in March. Not that many of the trends that we identified prior to COVID aren't still relevant, but COVID has really put a magnifying glass on all of those and has accelerated a number of them exponentially. So you can just look at the timeline here. We started in mid-March, and we just kind of took a quick look, a snapshot at what the impact on grocery shopping was in general. We'll talk a little bit more about that. And then as economies started to shut down and layoffs started to occur en masse, as we got into April, there were concerns about America's ability to feed families. We saw exponential increases in the need to feed in the charitable supply chain and corresponding decreases in donations as products were flying off of shelves. And then as we got further into this and we started to realize that this wasn't going to be just a sort of short-term thing, we started looking at demographic patterns and who was shopping. So we looked at Hispanics and Black shoppers and other demographics and the way they were adjusting their own patterns in urban areas and rural areas and the like. And then as we got a little further in, we started thinking about things like cooking. So we had a whole generation of folks who were cooking for the first time, or lots of folks who were cooking occasionally, who were cooking a lot more often. And as consumers were hunkering down in the early days and turning to nostalgia and comfort foods, as they realized that this was going to be a long haul proposition, they started thinking more about their aspirational goals of eating healthier during the pandemic and what that would look like and what they needed to do in order to shop well for themselves and their families. And then kind of as we got into May, we did a gut check. What were consumer expectations? And by the way, how would we reconcile some of what they said they were going to do and their behavior as consumers versus what they actually did in their behavior as shoppers in store and online? And then as we started getting further into it, we started looking at things like food waste. You've all saw those pictures of fields being plowed under and spilt milk. And I don't have time today to talk about the connectivity between supply chains and the need to do a better job of intersecting distribution networks and nodes, but that's become a really big issue for us. And then as we turned into the summer, we got a little bit more specific in terms of specific categories and own brands and frozen and other ready-to-eat options and prepared foods. Again, at that point in time, some economies were starting to open up. We started seeing the return to restaurants in some way, shape, or form, and I'll talk a little bit about that. And then as we got on into summer, there were concerns about the epidemiology. What would the virus look like going forward? How would that impact shopping trips and cooking trends and the like? And now as we get into, and by the way, we had our national promotion. FMI sponsors National Family Meals Month in the month of September. The original goal of that was to kind of talk about getting families together to eat one more meal a week together. And we felt a little sheepish about that this year, given that families were eating virtually 3 meals a day together, day after day, week after week, month after month. So we kind of amended that promotion to talk about staying healthy with family meals in September. And now as we turn into the fourth quarter of the year, what's the impact going to be on holiday plans? We just had Halloween. We have Thanksgiving coming up. We have Christmas after that. And as many of you know, Q4 for food retailers is the make or break quarter of the year. So what is that going to look like? So let's talk a little bit about all this. Again, this is kind of an overview of the trend. And I would just say that concerns about COVID-19 have been and remain high. There's a little bit more confidence as the guidance becomes clearer, as we get to know more about public health restrictions. And again, as much of that has been decentralized to state offices and state departments of health, and we've seen the return of those waves. People are taking it seriously. We've seen sort of the fluctuation of the opening and closing of economies, but still the vast majority of Americans remain concerned or extremely concerned. There are very few people who have a cavalier attitude about COVID-19. If you think about changes in grocery shopping, this is a really interesting slide. Let's talk about where, okay? Over 3/4 of consumers have made a change in where they shop. Almost half, or 40% of them, are shopping fewer stores. So, you know, if you're like my household, and many of us have migrated to this, pre-COVID, we were cherry picking more formats more frequently to meet our needs. Well, that is, you know, seen as a risky behavior during COVID. So we're shopping fewer stores. Almost 30% are shopping more online. And as we get through this in the next 20 minutes or so, I'm going to put a spotlight on online, because probably the two biggest shifts in consumer behavior were they're focusing on food retail versus away from home, thinking about that, and more online shopping. In fact, exponentially more online shopping, and I'll talk more about that. A few are avoiding the shops that they would frequent. Some actually changed the store shop that their primary store destination, just over 10%. And 10% no longer shop in store at all. And that's a really significant number for whatever their reason, whether it's lack of confidence, maybe it's a health concern, or they're compromised in some way, but some have migrated to 100% online. And that's a challenge for retailers, in that if you think about their most precious assets, it's those brick and mortar stores. So that's significant. So let's talk about, we just talked about where they shop. Now, how they shop and who they shop are really important. So the vast majority, almost 90% of consumers have made a change in how they shop. And what that means is they're shopping less frequently. So they're making fewer trips, but they're much more deliberate when they make those trips. So 44% or north of 44% are spending more money, although they're spending less time in store. So they're getting in and getting out, but they're getting exactly what they need. They're focusing a little bit more on a narrower range of items. So it's, you're losing a little bit of that impulse buy and that browsing of the aisles or the perimeter because of the need to get in and out more quickly. And again, more are spending more money online. And as we get into that, I'll talk a little bit about that, because more money online doesn't necessarily cannibalize that in-store spend. And really the Omni Shopper is the retailer's best shopper. And here's the last bit about these changes, and that is who's shopping. So you can see almost a quarter of them said that only one person shops, when personally shopping could have been a family behavior or at least a shared responsibility. It's one person, and the person who is doing the primary shopping may be a different person than it was pre-COVID. And in more than 10% of all cases, it's a third party who is doing the shopping. So the household members themselves are not necessarily going in at all. So massive shifts is the summary here in the who, where, and how consumers are shopping. So you can see, the average shopping basket. The basket has been relatively high. If you think about the fact that 50% of dollars were being spent away from home, that average weekly spend is well up over $100. You can see during the early days of the pandemic, it really spiked. And we'll talk more about that, because if you go back to the last time we did this consumer tracker, so if you go back to the days of pantry loading, some might say hoarding, we were seeing north of $150 per shopping trip. And now you could see it started to creep back in early October, when there were just some talk about maybe a third wave or spikes. Now think about the last couple of weeks in November, we are starting to see more of that. So we're starting to see consumers spend more money. I think we're going to see sharp increases again. And I think November and December, notwithstanding holidays, could start looking like mid and late March as a result of what's happened recently. And that's going to test the supply chain as well. We've already seen a number of products go on allocation. You've seen restrictions in maybe some of the stores you shop in on what you can buy. And we've still seen some, in very select categories, some chronic shortages, as you all know. By and large, we've really, I think, returned some degree of normalcy or stability to the supply chain. And by and large, if an item is out of stock when you go into store these days, there's a pretty good chance if you go in the next day, or you go in later that day or early the next morning, you'll find it there as well. And on the right-hand side of the screen, you can see average number of trips. It really dipped, in the late spring. It's starting to pick back up. I have a feeling that the frequency is going to dip again as we get further into this. So here we'll see online shopping habits and the frequency of online shopping. I'm going to come back to this. It's really kind of interesting. If you look at how this is tracked, at least occasionally up to almost 60% of all consumers. And now we're north of 10%. And I'll talk a little bit about what that means in the context of the larger mix of online versus in-store shopping when I put the spotlight on Econ in just a couple of minutes. And now here we are. So we're in the fourth quarter of the year. Back to school was a little bit different this year, given the way K through 12 and colleges and universities have been handling all of this. Thanksgiving, and it's interesting, I've been talking to a number of CEOs and chief merchants over the last several weeks about their forecast for the holidays this year. Right now, the forecast is pretty good. We do see a very favorable outlook both for Thanksgiving and December. Most of the folks I talk to are looking at maybe up 15 to 20% over last year, but I have to say that that's subject to change. So if you look at the quote in the Thanksgiving box, this consumer is saying, it'll be successful if I'm able to celebrate in person with my close family and virtually with all my friends, but family gatherings. And if any of you have been tuning in to the news as of late, Dr. Anthony Fauci was on, I think yesterday, the day before, talking about a quick shift in their plans to be together with their kids. And they're going to have Thanksgiving alone at home, but virtually with their kids. So that may mean more virtual gatherings or smaller gatherings over the course of Thanksgiving. A little bit too early to tell what it's going to look like for December. And keep in mind, in certain sections of the country, it's going to be different. So I talked to a couple of retailers in Florida over the last week. So we've got the borders are shut down. They're not going to get the huge Canadian population. A lot of South Americans come up around that time of year, the holidays. That's probably not going to happen. Snowbirds, hard to say because they generally come in for a longer period of time. But all of these shifts are being watched very, very carefully, both in terms of what we think the holiday season will look like, how we define success, and then if we start seeing huge spikes in cases and more, compression of the supply chain, whether or not we're going to have everything that we need. And then, of course, I think we'd all like to put 2020 into the books. So New Year's Eve and Day, we'll turn the corner on 2020, and we'll look for hopefully a much better 2021. Two massive, massive shifts in the course of the COVID-19 pandemic. One is in the spend of food away from home versus at home. So you can see the trends through the years of what we'll call food service versus retail, or food away from home versus food for preparation or consumption at home. And you saw this steady rise of restaurants and food service to the point where, as of a year ago or a year before, depending on who you talked to or what your source was, the food dollar was roughly split in half. So roughly 50 cents of every food dollar that you spent as consumers was spent away from home. And the COVID-19 pandemic changed all of that. At first, it was massive shutdown and food service went off a cliff. There have been a lot of restaurants that have attempted to pivot their own businesses. They've moved towards takeout. Some have stood up grocery stores. Some have become ghost kitchens. Some are partnering with retailers, so you can still shop for your favorite meals through retail stores, which you can still go into. And for some segments like QSR, where you had a huge takeout business anyway, they were a bit more resilient than, say, casual dining or fine dining was to all that. And you started to see some of that come back over the summer as the economy started to open up some. And there has been some resilience there, but now you're starting to see it change again. And who knows what it's going to look like as we look towards the end of the year. Holiday was a time when a lot of folks looked forward to going out to eat and celebrating New Year's, et cetera. Hard to say, but that's been a massive shift. And I will say, for food retailers, this has been a great opportunity to build loyalty and to build equity with their consumers over this period of time, because they really are the one place where consumers are going. And I have to give a shout out to the frontline workers, to the real heroes of this pandemic, those folks that are manning the aisles and the registers and the customer service desks in store, the drivers who are delivering so that we can get product on the back, out of the back room and onto shelves, the distribution center workers, the manufacturing workers. We really need to give a big shout out and a hat tip to them for ensuring that we're taking care of our customers and our community. So I'd ask all of you, next time you go shopping, thank a grocery worker. That said, the other big trend, online. So for those of you who are shopping online, you can leave a little note since you're not going to be shopping those workers in store. And you can see, I'm going to spend a little bit of time on this, probably the balance of my 10 minutes or so on this. You can see that our shopper trends in 2019 showed about 10.5% of shoppers doing some grocery shopping online. And as I said to you, we published our US grocery trends in February of this year, and that was an uptick of about 50% to almost 15% in February of this year. And then you go to March, April, and it doubled. It was almost 30%. This is massive, and it's worth clicking into. So think about online shopping. And the first, one retailer said to me recently, the first 6 months of the COVID-19 was equivalent to 6 years of growth in online shopping. And you can see the number at the bottom of the screen there, 300% increases in the first months of this pandemic. That's just such an extraordinary number on the face of it. And by the way, that was already on, in some cases, a foundation of double digits within select retailers. Just to dimensionalize that for you, okay, we have been on roughly a 5-year journey with Nielsen and the Dialogic Group. Back in the day, about 4 years ago, we took our first forecast at what we thought the online marketplace would look like, and we pegged it at about $100 billion by 2025, or about 20% of all food sales. And if you think about it, grocery was a little late to the table, in the sense that many of you probably haven't seen a bank teller in a couple of decades. Obviously, we've seen the growth of online and non-food categories grow significantly through the years, but food is different, right? Food is tactile, it's intimate, it's a metaphor for identity or differences or similarities between cultures. It's sensory, right? We use all 5 senses. But once it started to go, it really started moving in a hurry. So we've revised our forecast 3 times in the last 2 years. The most recent being, we almost doubled. Well, we took our projection from 100 billion to 143 billion by 2025. One caveat there, that was pre-COVID. So obviously we're going to have to reforecast that again. And you can just equivalize that into the number of brick and mortar stores at an average square footage of 35 to 40,000 square feet. It means that this genie is out of the bottle. These shifts will continue to occur. And this is a real challenge. And I just said the Omni Shopper is probably our best shopper, but as one retailer said to me recently, why would I consciously train my consumer to abandon my most precious asset, which is my brick and mortar store? And if you think about the sensory experience you have when you go into stores, I was at a new store opening here in Northern Virginia where I live recently, and the sights and the sounds and the colors and the smells, the aromas, everything, you can't replicate that on a computer screen. You can do a lot of things, but you can't do that. But so then why is this happening with, such accelerated paces? Well, just look at the screen. The average household has 11 connected devices. And pretty soon we're going to get to the day where this thing, I'm holding my phone in my hand, is going to be your personal avatar. And when that happens, it's really going to start to get crazy. So let's take a look at what we see here. So in 2019, last year, about 60% of retailers said that they were going to use their Econ platforms as a tool to differentiate. And by that, we mean, to be competitive in the marketplace, like a number are using own brands or other value-added services. So Econ became a differentiator in 2019. Go up to 2020, almost 90%, 87% of retailers are saying that. And you can see the numbers on the right there, right? So 87% differentiating, plus 90% say their online sales will increase this year, as well as basket sizes as a result of all that. These are really, really sort of astounding numbers. And if you think about how the technology is affecting all that, you can see, a lot of these trends towards touchless or frictionless were underway before. But as consumers get more comfortable with this, and retailers understand the application of the technology, these trends are only going to accelerate even further. So you're going to see more of this. You're going to see more, checkout as you go. You're going to see more smart carts going forward. You're going to see more self-checkout at the front end. And there's a lot of reasons for all that. But I guess all of this is meant to say that technology is going to irrevocably change the way we behave as consumers and the way retailers apply those technologies to meet our needs. Artificial intelligence, machine learning, robotics, automation, all of those applications are changing the calculus for the way consumers behave, the way they shop, and the way retailers are going to perform and what they're going to do to have to remain competitive. So last slide, I can't get through it. So we're talking, U.S. Department of Agriculture, States Department of Agriculture. I couldn't be with all of you today without talking a little bit about how we're supporting feed programs through online grocery pilots and what we're doing in terms of our interface with USDA and our changeover. If you can just read the stat there, in 2019, EBT payments were 3% of all sales. And we're in a very, very uncertain time. And as an industry, we have to remain behind all American shoppers, regardless of how they can buy the food that they need to put meals on their tables. And for those who are using assistance programs, it makes no difference. Home delivery and pickup models have really been clearly, I just talked about that during this emergency, for all types of customers. And online ordering and payment for SNAP customers have to be an important step in addressing the evolving needs of all U.S. grocery shoppers, both in-store and online. And the interest in online SNAP programs has grown as our members have worked to ensure that we leave no customer behind or unserved during this critical time. So we continue to work with USDA to guarantee any SNAP retailer who would like to be able to participate, you can become authorized as an online SNAP retailer as swiftly as possible. And you can see on the last line on the slide there, we're now up to 46 states and the District of Columbia who are using online SNAP pilots, up from only 3 in March. So for those of you who are, contemplating this, we really urge you to get online as quickly as possible so that we can continue to take care of our customers and our communities. One last line, and this is where we sort of, start looking into the crystal ball. What's next? I don't know. I always get worried about when people ask me, so what's this going to look like in the aftermath of COVID-19? It's tough. I always say those who look too deeply into the crystal balls wind up eating a lot of glass. So I will say there are a couple of things we know for sure. The restaurant industry is going to have to take some real time to reset and rebuild. There's a good percentage of them that sadly will not come back. Those that are pivoting, I think will survive, but that will hinge a lot on consumer confidence in going into those establishments and knowing that the experience that they enjoyed pre-COVID will be very, very different, at least for the foreseeable future. And by the way, when I say the foreseeable future, in order for any of this to return to whatever the new normal is going to be, we do need a vaccine and we do need it at scale. And, you're reading the same stuff I am relative to that. We do have a little bit of a line of sight to that, given our relationship with the agencies, CDC, the administration, the other agencies, FDA, USDA, and the like, and with Congress. But it's hard to say when we're going to get to that point in time. So restaurants have a ways to go. Online shopping is only going to increase. I think that's going to be a really interesting challenge for our members to accommodate consumers who want to go online. And keep in mind, we like to say the last mile is the most expensive. So we're going to have to change the economics of e-com in order to deliver profitably to our customers going forward. So that's going to be the omni-channel cost to serve model is going to definitely change as we look at this. And then, as we continue to track consumer behavior, there's going to be a great reckoning around assortment. So what's going to go online and what's going to go on shelf. And maybe auto replenishment and subscription is a concept whose time has come, and shopping in store is going to be just purely experiential. We've seen a lot of manufacturers rationalize their assortment and SKUs in order to increase capacity for those items that are most in demand. Will that continue to be the place? Will we see real new innovation, or are we going to go back to a period of line extensions for the convenience of our consumers? There's so much that can happen. It's a trying, but it's an exciting and dynamic time. And as I turn it back to Ivan, I'll just say this. I've been doing this for about 4 decades now. I've never been as proud and pleased to be part of the food industry as I am today, and the way in which our members, our product suppliers, our wholesalers, and our retailers have shown up and turned out to take care of all of our consumers. I like to say the industry is at its very best when our customers and communities need us the most. So with that, thanks very much. I hope I've given you a little bit of food for thought and some things that you can apply as you take these back to your business. And with that, I'll turn it back to you, Ivan. Thank you.
Well, Mark, thank you so much. And like I said, there are no questions in the chat, but I want to thank you again, Mark, and thank FMI for all your support and everything that you guys do for our industry. I just want to remind everybody that this presentation will be available on the America's Food and Beverage Show website. So it's americasfoodandbeverage.com. It'll be available Friday afternoon for everyone to see. And thanks everyone for joining us. And thank you again, Mark.
Thank you, Alvin. Stay safe, everybody. Take care.